Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be working on Leonardo from the 1990 movie Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I did this using Winsor Newton oil paints. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so here we are working on Leonardo, and I'm starting off with my green color for his forehead, which is an oxide of chromium. Now I am using my flat synthetic on this area, so I'm working kind of soft. So on this painting, I wanted to give it more of a Renaissance feel, you know, like the old masters like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Caravaggio. I like the style they used, so I'm going to keep it loose around him, and then as we start focusing more towards the subject, which is him, we're going to start getting it more tighter. So we're going to go from tight because we're starting off with the subject Leonardo, and then as we expand we're going to go a little bit loose. I'm also going to keep it a little dark around the edges of this painting. So we're adding a little Prussian blue, doing some highlights and darks. There you can see me blending in those colors, making them look seamless, adding a few highlights. And when I do those highlights, I am using a warm white color, and I will mix a little bit of oxide of chromium with that warm white for the highlights on his skin. And we're moving towards his shell, the inner workings of the shell, and I'm using a lot of raw sienna and Vandyke Brown for that. Now here I am keeping it sort of loose, not keeping it too tight. I'm kind of just blocking in, and I'll later on, after I finish blocking in, I'll start tightening up a little bit. So I don't want to keep it too tight at this stage. So I'm just relaxing, slowly taking my time, blending the colors together, adding a little brown right there for his fingers. And I did use a lot of Vandyke Brown mixture with the green, which is the chromium of oxide, to tone that green down a little bit. Now here we are starting on his knee pads, and I am adding a little bit of Cad Red to warm those colors up, because I believe those are like a brownish, reddish brown color, those knee pads. And then I will also add a little Prussian blue to darken it up. And I'm also creating this gray, which was a combination of green and red, working on his feet, doing his toes, his ankles, and at this stage, this is where I'm going to start loosening it up a little bit. It's not going to be as tight as it was above where his head and his chest is. So as we start working towards the extremities of him, it's going to be pretty loose, and I'll start blending the feet into the ground. So here I am. You can see those Prussian blues I'm using for the shadows. I don't like using straight black for shadows. I always like adding a little bit of color to it, just to give it something more interesting, not as flat. And I did add a little bit of reflection of light right there with the Cad Red on his knee pad, because there's going to be a light source behind him. And there we are, going back into his leg area, getting those beautiful chromium of oxide greens in there, mixing with a touch of Cad Red right there. You can see how that Cad Red does a beautiful job of warming up those greens. It's one of my absolute favorite colors. And we're going to get started on the background. Here we go, adding a little bit of raw sienna mixture with a little bit of Vandyke Brown. And we're working behind the stool at the moment. And then I'll start painting in that stool on top. I feel this is easier to work that way. And for those background colors, I am using a little bit of black to darken it up with the Vandyke Brown. Touch of warm white and a touch of chromium right there, because we want to get some of that chromium of oxide in the background, as well as using him on Leonardo to blend those colors seamlessly together. So we are using some warm white right there with a touch of with sienna. That works beautifully with warming that. We've got a warm white already, so we're going to warm it up even more. And here I am doing the railing. And I'm using my filbert brush right there to get some nice paint textures. Works beautifully because it's a bristle brush, so it'll really get those brush strokes to show through. And in order to do this, I do use a Winsor Newton Liquin Impasto to achieve that effect. And do you see how I'm blending in the feet into the background? And I'm also making it a little bit darker. This is a Renaissance technique known as sfumato, and I love using this technique. We're just keeping it loose on his feet. We don't want him too tight. Keep him nice and loose, blending out with the background. And we're getting close to finishing up this painting right there. Finishing up those rails, those old, decrepit, decomposing rails. This is an old barn house, if you've seen the movie, that they're staying in. And this is Leonardo as he's watching over Raphael in the bathtub. So this is in the bathroom scene. And I am flipping it over so I can get those edges a lot easier because I'm right-handed. So it allows me to get those edges correctly. All right, flip back around, and we are still working on the background, getting some more texture there. And the panel I'm using is an Artefex panel. And this is a primed Artefex panel. You gotta check out their metal panels because they are phenomenal. They work beautifully with oil paints. They got all kinds of other panels. The link is down in the description, you'll see it. I put all the information below. Here I am using my Tischler dagger that I picked up from Rosemary & Company. They have the absolute best paintbrushes on the market. I love my Tisch daggers. And those are also, description of those are below to Rosemary & Company, where I get my paintbrushes. They have all the beautiful daggers and bristle brushes that I use. I also use Ultimate Filberts as well. And here we are working this area. And again, this full tutorial is available on my Patreon channel. It's going to be 1.5 hours long where I go in depth in teaching you everything on how to oil paint, how to color mix, how to achieve perfect proportions. Here we are with the finished product as we're panning around, showing you those textures in the paint that I've achieved using the Liquin Impasto. And I'm very happy how this came out. And I want to thank you again for checking out this video and have much more content for you to come. Once again, check out the Patreon. The link is on the video right there. Patreon.com/artofgarduno. Thank you again. Alright, and that concludes the tutorial on Leonardo from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, subscribing, and commenting below. Now, if you would like to see the full tutorial, which is about 1 to 1.5 hours long, that is on my Patreon channel. And in those videos, I go into great detail explaining color mixing, how I achieve textures, how I do the details, and how I do the backgrounds. And the link to that is also below. So come join me and my students on Patreon and learn to advance your skill. Alright, we'll see you in the next video.